Alright, welcome back. In the last couple videos we did materials on the houses. I've since corrected the materials to look not quite as silly. In this video we're going to put together we're going to use Forest Pro and put together the grass, the trees, the mulch, the bushes to try to set the scene realistically. So the first thing we want to do is probably on this model is to put some trees in the back of the house. Right now the HDRI is what we're seeing, and it doesn't look half bad, but I happen to know this is an infill project in the suburbs, so there's going to be some trees in the background. You know, if I was doing more, I would get some other models of houses I've built and plop them in next door or something, just to give me, you know, appropriate surroundings. But for now, we're just going to set the scene like it's a woodsy background and do that. So let's go ahead and put some trees in the back of this thing. I'm going to go into my working viewport and orbit around so I can see what I'm doing. Now I've got the land going down in the back, which is good. The goal is I don't want to see the horizon off under the trees. So let's put the trees in to show you what I mean. I'm going to go up here. Forest Pro installs a toolbar, so this helps you get there quick. You can also go to the Create panel and get there, but this just does that for you. For right now, I'm going to just apply the generic forest object to this object. So I'm going to say Generate. It's already there. I'm going to click my grass. It's going to say something. I'm going to say yes. What Forest Pro did now was to stick a generic object scattered all along that grass. That's a 2D plane. Obviously, I want to do some trees, so what I might actually do is set the area. Right now, I put it everywhere. I'm going to go ahead and tell the area I only want it to be in certain spots. So if I go into my forest object, the first thing I do so I can find it later is tend to give this a name. So instead of forest 001, I do forest-trees. And then I'm going to go, I've minimized all these panels. It's easier to get through them if they're all minimized. It's not as confusing. First thing I'm going to do is go into areas. And it's auto-saving here. Now it's saying the surface area is on. I'm going to actually turn that off. I don't want it everywhere on the surface. I do want to add an area. I can use a spline to define it, so I could go draw a spline in the drawing. To skip that step, I'm going to paint. I'm going to use this paint feature. I'm going to turn the paint on, and I'm going to go to my brush options. And max size, I'm going to make this, say, 75 feet. And what that did was give me a 75-foot circle. So I'm going to draw a swath of trees going across the back of this property. Let me pause. Alright, sorry, I had a quick pause there. Anyway, I've turned on this brush tool. I've set my max size to 75, which you can see that circle. That looks a little big for me. I'm going to down that to, say, 60 feet. And that made the circle a little smaller. I can work in this 3D view. I find it easier. I can close those options. I find it easier to work in the top view. Now this brush, all I have to do is it'll sort of draw me a boundary wherever I click it. So I could run some trees up onto the sides, and you can see it's only putting trees where I draw this boundary. Maybe I want these trees to be a low. Let's see. So anyway, we painted the areas we want the trees, and I'm sorry, I'm thinking as I do this, so it hurts. I'm going to next tell it what geometry we want. So right now it brought in its default object. I want to go into my library. It's going into HQ Plants 1. These are plants available by, let's see here, and this is just lagging behind me, HQ Plants Library. I've bought a few of them, and once you buy them you can add their library. So I know I have HQ Plants 1, which is a nice array of trees and bushes and just general things. I'm in this one all the time, and this will populate most everything you need in the scene. I happen to have that one. I have a HD Flowers one, which is a good one to use as well, and HD Trees 5, which gives me some evergreens. I had to buy those to get for a specific project. I could certainly use some more evergreens, but I'm going to stick in HQ Plants 1. I happen to know that if I start typing here, maples, I happen to use maple 14 and 15 a lot. They're about the same size, and they can give me a kind of foresty background. So I'm going to go ahead and import these things. It's going to rescale them to match my units, fine. It's going to tell me that it's going to display a point cloud versus geometry. I'm going to say yes. It's going to scale the other object. And now it changed the default object to the trees I picked. Now, since these trees are bigger, they can be further apart. Also, I still have this default object there. If I isolate this, you can see those rectangles down there. They're now point clouds, but I don't want this default object, so I'm going to click it and delete it. Now I've just got maple 14 and 15. Now these trees, it's defaulted a distribution map. I want to go in here and change the parameters a little. So it's giving me this dense map at this unit. If I very delicately roll this slider, I can adjust the distance to a more realistic difference. What I tend to do for a forest, because this pattern is an organic pattern, and a lot of times I don't want gaps in the trees, so what I'll do to cheat it is I'll go down to a grid pattern, and it's auto-saving. So if I isolate this again and look at the top view, you can see this grid pattern. Now that's artificial for a forest, but what it does do is it doesn't overlap the trees. If I go into this dense spread, you can see the trees are interfering with each other, so I don't like that to happen. So I go back to my grid, I adjust the size till it looks the way I want it to look, just kind of a solid tree line. And that puts the trees just about where I want them. There's some more things we're going to do. For instance, we're going to go down to the transforms, and we're going to tell it to give it random rotations. So here it rotated everything 360 degrees on the z-axis, and it defaulted to 5%. I like to make these like 2. I don't like my trees to look, I like them to look like they're straight up. Because I think the trees tend to not vary in that much percent, but that's just me. So I'm going to give them random rotation. I can give them a random scale. That changed me from 80 to 120. I could, do anything. If I want the trees to be generally smaller, I'll maybe go 80 to 90. Which again, I don't want to emphasize a forested background, so the trees being a little smaller might help. You're certainly not going to see a forest. You'll see trees behind it, but I just don't want to draw attention to it. So I'm going to do the scale that way. And then this up here gives me a random translation, so it shifts the trees around. So that's actually good to enable. And now it doesn't look from the picture as much like they're in a planted in crop rows. So that looks good to me for now. I'm going to unisolate this and look at a couple other things we might want to change. The surface, I like to go into here, and this is telling the trees to point straight up no matter what. You could have them bend with the surface, but that's not realistic for trees. It's telling me what surface I'm on. I'm going to click this button. So if I do something to the surface, the trees will move with it. And that's about all I need to deal with to get these trees. The other thing I want to do is go into color tint. And this gives the trees a little bit of actually I'll do that after we render it the first time. Now one other key thing is, which will really cut down rendering time, is you want to select your forest object, right click it, go into your V-Ray properties, and turn down your subdivisions multiplier to like say 0.01. That's all you have to do, and that will greatly reduce rendering time. Again, as I look at this front view, I see trees. I actually would like to see lower trees, but denser. So I'm going to go ahead into my transforms, and I'm going to, I'm going to go into my distribution map, and again, make the grid smaller so the trees are a little closer together. Okay, I could even say rotate that map 10 degrees to take out any. I was seeing a row of trees there. I don't want to see that. I could also, again, my land slopes down in the back. I could go into my geometry and select these things and actually offset the Z, start pulling the Z down. So it's moving everything down. Now, that isn't physically accurate because now you see the trees are kind of starting to go through the ground. But for what we're doing, I don't want to see horizon behind it. However, I'll fix that the right way. So I'm going to go change my Z offset to 0 and do a quick little preview render here to see if I'm getting trees in the right spot. Okay, great. Now the trees are all the same color. We'll change the material to give it a little variation. So I'm going to say random strength tint. You can type just about anything in these boxes, and what that's going to do after I optimize materials, click optimize, say yes, close this guy. Now if I preview this, you should notice a little color variation from tree to tree. And you can barely just see it happen. This one got a little oranger, that's the one I was watching. But again, just another thing for a little realism. I'm going to do a bigger render and pause it while I do it. Okay, I had to pause there for a minute. Basically, I've rendered it with the trees on, and as Dave here has pointed out, the thing that's not real to me about this with the trees is that I should see some reflections of trees across the street. So what I'm going to do is go in here, make sure my forest object is selected, and I'm going to go into the camera settings, and there's a setting here that's limiting my trees to the visibility. I actually want to uncheck that. Now it's going to take theoretically more time to process trees that aren't in view, but what this will do is block light and give me more realistic lighting on the house. The other thing I want to do is add some trees across the street. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, I need some surface for them to sit on. So I'm going to create a plane across the street. And I only need this thing to be a tree or two wide, just so I get some trees in the reflection, but not a solid forest line. So I think that should be the right size. I'm going to move it down to, and I don't know why my move command is not working right. Hang on 1 second. Alright, it turns out my effect pivot only was selected. I've just turned that off. I'm going to turn my snap on, drag this down to the height of the grass, and maybe I will turn my snap off and move it so it kind of connects there. I just wanted a little more land. I guess I could have stretched this land object out too. In fact, that's what I will do. So this land object right now, the grass, is a Boolean object. I'm going to collapse that to a mesh and simply select my left side. I'm going to select, I just selected all those points, and I'm just going to drag them out to give myself some more land over here. Now with my trees, excuse me, I've got 1 minute left. I think I'm going to continue this in the next video. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll do that in the next video.